Have you ever just looked around and felt like everything is splitting apart at the seams? Well, today we're going to dive into the invisible walls that divide us. And we're going to use the really fascinating case of Taiwan to see how these deep fractures play out in a modern democracy. And look, it's not just you. So many of us share this feeling, this sense that walls are going up everywhere. Not just between countries, but right inside our own communities. So what is really going on here? To get a real handle on this, we're going to turn to a pretty powerful framework from geopolitical analyst Tim Marshall and his book, Divided. Okay, so Marshall's big idea is this. We are living in what he calls an age of walls. The thinking was that globalization would create this amazing borderless world, right? Well, he argues that the exact opposite has happened. It's actually triggered this huge backlash where people are retreating into their tribes, based on things like nationalism and identity, and they're building new walls to feel safe. So he breaks it down into four main types of barriers. You've got the physical walls, the ones we can all see, but then he gets into the really interesting stuff, the invisible walls that are arguably way more powerful. We're talking about psychological walls, economic walls, and even digital walls that are shaping our world right now. Now, let's actually put this whole framework to the test. We're going to apply it to Taiwan and see if it helps us make sense of the really deep and complex social divisions that are running through its society today. So, the first wall is the most obvious one. It's the water. Now, the Taiwan Strait isn't made of bricks and mortar, but since 1949, it's acted as this incredibly powerful physical barrier. It's basically carved out a unique space where a completely distinct Taiwanese consciousness could grow and flourish, separate from the mainland. But that physical barrier of the strait, that's just the start. The truly challenging walls for Taiwan today are the ones you can't see, the ones forged from identity and a growing gap between the rich and poor. And this right here, this slide gets to the very heart of the psychological wall. It's a fundamental clash between two completely different visions for the nation. On one side, you have the Republic of China framework, with its deep historical ties to the mainland. And on the other, you have the Taiwan framework, which is all about a distinct, localized identity. This isn't just some academic debate. This is the central fault line of modern Taiwanese politics. So what's so critical to understand here is that this isn't your typical political argument over things like taxes or healthcare. The source argues it's a conflict over the very definition of the nation itself. And when the stakes are that high, it makes compromise almost impossible. And as the quote says, it just leads to this deep social friction that really hurts the potential for democratic agreement. And happening right alongside this identity debate, you have this powerful economic wall rising up, creating these sharp divides between the haves and the have-nots. Okay, let's just pause and really look at this table for a second, because it reveals something so important. Looking at the last 30 years, it's not just one gap. It's a widening chasm pretty much everywhere. The gap between capital owners and workers, it's growing, making social class feel more set in stone. The value of a bachelor's degree compared to a master's, that gap is widening too, which tells you the job market is getting tougher. And maybe most critically, that income gap between the older and younger generations, it is stubbornly wide. And this bar chart, wow, it just drives home one of the most stubborn divides. That gap between what baby boomers could earn and what younger millennials are earning today, it isn't closing. And that's not just a number on a chart. That's a ceiling on opportunity for a whole generation, and it's fueling this widespread sense of frustration among Taiwan's youth. So what's a key driver of this economic wall? A housing market where prices have just skyrocketed way past what people are earning. This basically locks younger people out of one of the main ways to build wealth, and it just hardens that line between the social classes. Now, this economic pressure doesn't just build walls in the real world. It also shapes the ones we run into and the ones we build ourselves, online. So let's turn to our third internal wall, the digital divide, which is like a powerful amplifier for all these other divisions. Here's where it gets really, really interesting. You'd probably think the digital divide is all about money, right? The cost of a computer or an internet plan. But look at this data for low-income households without students. A whopping 60% of them don't have internet simply because they feel they don't need it. The barrier isn't just economic anymore. It's become cultural and motivational. So this leads to two totally different kinds of digital walls. You've got the top-down kind, like China's Great Firewall, where the government just controls everything. But in democracies like Taiwan, the wall is bottom-up. And think about it, it's built by us. It's our clicks, it's our shares,
And it's the algorithms on everything from PTT to YouTube that are designed to feed us more of what we already believe. And slowly but surely, this creates these personal echo chambers that completely shatter any sense of a shared reality.
So, okay, now we have the pieces of the puzzle: the psychological wall, the economic wall, and the digital wall. But the real key is seeing how they all lock together, how they make each other stronger. Which leads to the big question: can anything actually be done to break them down? See, these walls don't just stand there on their own. They're interconnected. When people are anxious about money, they cling tighter to their tribal identities. Then, the digital echo chambers grab those identities and just amplify them, making them more extreme. It creates this vicious cycle where a divided society becomes totally unable to solve the very economic problems that are fueling the division to begin with. So, how do you even start building bridges? Well, the source suggests a three-part strategy. First, you've got to cool the temperature on identity politics and shift the focus to things everyone can care about, like economic fairness. Second, you take a hammer to that economic wall by tackling real-world problems like housing costs. And third, you bridge the digital divide, not just by giving people computers, but through education and making sure everyone feels included. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. If we are truly living in an age of walls, where being divided seems to be the default setting, what does it take for us, in our own lives, in our own communities, to become the ones who actually build the bridges?